Hello everyone, Data here, and welcome to a brand new series of videos that I will be doing here on the channel, redrafting the fill-in-the-blank class of a particular NHL draft. Oftentimes, many writers or YouTubers in the past have made videos that redraft a particular draft, but they don't take into account the context of the moment. For example, it's easy to say that the Flyers should have drafted Cale Makar instead of Nolan Patrick back in the 2017 draft, but if the team was never going to take a defenseman and wanted a forward, namely a centerman, I would actually argue that the Flyers missed out on Elias Pettersson and not necessarily Cale Makar. Another difficult thing to do is comparing a goaltender to a skater, something that I find these redrafts often do without looking at the context and organizational needs at the time. So in this series, I will be looking at the top 10 or 20 drafted players at a certain position, forward, defense, or goalie from that draft class, and then rank the actual top 10 of that position and see how the league may have looked very different if teams had drafted the actual top or third or seventh best forward in their spot, looking back now a few years down the road. At the same time, it's a bit of a where are they now or whatever happened to for the players who got drafted so highly, but years later never really did anything in the NHL. So to start off today, we will be looking at the forward class of the 2009 NHL Entry Draft. This is a very interesting class because, as you may see here, many of the top 20 forwards selected did not do very much or anything at all at the NHL level. Glenny, Leblanc, Paradis, all players who the organization unfortunately regret drafting when looking back on what could have been. In terms of format, I will be assigning who I believe the top 10 forwards of the 2009 draft are, 12 to 13 years later now, to the teams that drafted the first 10 forwards. I will speak about who the team drafted, what happened to him, who the adjusted selection would have been, and what kind of career that player has had so far. So, without further ado, let's get started. With the 18th overall selection in the 2009 NHL Entry Draft, the Montreal Canadiens took the 10th forward of the draft, Montreal native Louis Leblanc. Leblanc was not especially impressive at the NHL Combine, and one scout even said that his bust meter was on high. But with the draft being in Montreal and the hometown fans and media hungry for a francophone star, the Habs reached a little bit and passed on players such as Chris Kreider, which would really come back to haunt them, so as to select Leblanc. Leblanc was committed to Harvard, but after just 1 year there, he came to the QMJHL and went over a point per game. Good numbers, but not necessarily wow, as he was third in his team's scoring. He then went to Hamilton to play for the Bulldogs in the AHL and scored 22 points in 31 games before getting the call to Montreal. In the NHL, he scored 5 goals and 10 points in his 42-game 2011-12 rookie season. He then spent the entire 2012-13 season in Hamilton and only managed to score 10 goals and 18 points in 62 games. Leblanc would only play 8 more games in the NHL in 2013-14, going scoreless before more struggles in Hamilton. In June of 2014, Leblanc was traded to Anaheim for future considerations, played more AHL minutes, followed by bouncing around Europe for 15 games across 3 different leagues, and finally retired to return to Harvard. As of 2022, he works as a senior consultant for the consulting firm Oliver Wyman. Now when coming to the redraft of the 2009 forwards, I would argue that number 10 on that list is Riley Smith. Smith was drafted 69th overall by the Dallas Stars and made his NHL debut in 2011-12 with the Stars. He would play only 40 games with Dallas, scoring 3 goals and 9 points before being traded to Boston in the famed Tyler Seguin deal. After 2 years in Boston, he was traded to and spent 2 years in Florida before being traded to Vegas for a 4th round pick. As of the date of this recording, he has 412 points in 680 games for an extremely respectable .605 points per game. Extrapolated over an average 82-game season, Smith scores 21 goals and 29 assists for an even 50 points. Smith has especially come into his own since being traded to Vegas in 2017, most notably when he scored 60 points over 67 games during the 2017-18 season, in which he also added 22 points in 20 playoff games. In this redraft, the Montreal Canadiens would be very happy to have Smith over Leblanc. With the 15th selection in the draft, the Anaheim Ducks selected Peter Holland as the 9th forward to go. Holland showed great potential on the Guelph Storm of the OHL, scoring 234 points in 194 games across his last 3 seasons. Holland would go on to score 60 points in 71 games in his first full AHL season with the Syracuse Crunch in 2011-12 and began to see some NHL action with Anaheim. Holland played 29 games with Anaheim from 2011-12 to 13, scoring 5 goals and 7 points before being traded to Toronto in November of 2013. With the Leafs, Holland was quite serviceable as he scored 25 goals and 63 points in 174 games before being traded to Arizona and later having stints with the Canadiens and Rangers organizations. Holland left the NHL having scored 85 points in 266 games. He went on to have a couple of solid seasons in the KHL, and most recently played in the SHL, Sweden's first division, scoring 6 assists in 15 games before having his contract mutually terminated in December of 2021. In our redraft, Anaheim would use their 9th forward selection on Anders Lee, who originally did not get drafted until the 6th round, 152nd overall. Over an 82-game average, Lee scores 29 goals and 21 assists, an exact reversal of Riley Smith's numbers. Lee has spent his entire 562-game career with the New York Islanders and is the current captain of the organization. His career highlights include a 40-goal season in 2017-18 and leading his team to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2020 before losing to the eventual Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning. Although he has slowed down since 34 goals in 16-17 and 40 in 17-18, Lee is a huge part of the Islanders franchise, and it's hard to believe that he went so late. If they got a chance to do things over again, Anaheim would love a big power forward leader like Lee to complement their strong teams of a decade ago, as well as being a leader for the current squad of young talent. With the 13th selection in the draft, the Buffalo Sabres selected Zack Kassian. Kassian looked like a future Milan Lucic when drafted, having just come off of a 63-point, 136-penalty-minute season over 61 games with the Peterborough Petes. After some extended OHL time and a year in the minors, Kassian made his NHL debut in 2011-12 and only stuck around with the Sabres for 27 games, scoring 3 goals and 7 points, before being traded at the deadline to Vancouver for former 10th overall pick Cody Hodgson. After some okay seasons that saw him put up 59 points in 171 games, Kassian was traded to the Montreal Canadiens in a swap for Brandon Prust. In the Habs organization, Kassian was involved in a car accident, suffering a broken nose and a fractured foot. Although he was not the driver, Kassian was under the influence at the time, and this resulted in his being suspended without pay and sent to the NHL's substance abuse program. Upon completion of the program, Kassian was waived, told not to report to the AHL, and was subsequently shipped off to Edmonton for Ben Scrivens. On the Oilers, Kassian found new life and, over 389 games, has an 82-game average of 11 goals, 16 assists, and 112 penalty minutes as Connor McDavid's on-again, off-again tough guy line mate. But back to Buffalo. The Sabres made what at the time was a solid trade, but unfortunately Hodgson did not become the star they thought he would be, and after scoring 99 points in 218 games, including a final 78-game season in which he only scored 6 goals and 13 points, he would eventually walk in free agency. In our redraft, in what may be a controversial statement, but I'm sticking with it, Evander Kane, the 4th overall pick, would actually go here at 13 to Buffalo. Legal, personal, and bankruptcy issues aside, Evander Kane is ranked 7th in points per game for this forward class and has an 82-game career average of 28 goals, 26 assists, and 105 penalty minutes. In other words, the player that Buffalo actually wanted Kassian to be. However, due to the strength of the class and his personal issues that have played a major role in his moving to 5 teams throughout his career, I have Kane as the 8th ranked forward. Funnily enough, Kane did play in parts of 3 seasons for the Buffalo Sabres as he came over from Winnipeg with Zach Bogosian for the haul of Drew Stafford, Tyler Myers, Yoel Armia, Brendan Lemieux, and a first-round selection that became Jack Roslovic, and scored 118 points in 196 games before being traded to San Jose. Although his years in San Jose were far better than his years in Atlanta, Winnipeg, and Buffalo, when taking everything into consideration, I don't see Kane as the 3rd best forward in this draft and would have his adjusted position as 8th. With the 10th overall selection in the draft, Edmonton took the 7th forward off the board and selected Magnus Pajärvi. Having scored 17 points in 50 games in the first division of Sweden, the SHL, playing against men, the Oilers were very happy to select Päijärvi and already had him playing full-time in the NHL by the beginning of the 2010-11 season. In that season, he would score 15 goals and 34 points in 80 games, but never really came close to those numbers again. Over the next couple of seasons, Päijärvi would bounce between the NHL and the AHL, scoring another 24 points in 83 games before being traded in the offseason in what was actually a very sweet deal for the Oilers, as they moved Päijärvi, a second-round pick which actually became Ivan Barbashev, and a fourth-round pick to the St. Louis Blues for David Perron and a third-round pick. Perron did very well in the Oilers, scoring 76 points in 116 games. But then, in typical Edmonton fashion, they traded Perron to Pittsburgh for a first, later flipped that first to the Islanders for Griffin Reinhart, and that first became Matthew Barzal. Perron later returned to St. Louis, and the universe was once again balanced. But back to Päijärvi. Päijärvi spent parts of 5 seasons in St. Louis, and then 2 more in Ottawa before calling it a day and heading back to play in Europe, where his numbers have not been great. And barring a return to the NHL, finishes his career with 62 goals and 124 points in 467 games. Now in our redraft, the Oilers would have loved to have known how good Chris Kreider would turn out to be. As the 7th ranked forward in his class, Kreider has spent his entire 625-game career with the Rangers, scoring 211 goals and 394 points. A slightly lower points per game than Evander Kane, but considering the lack of legal issues and his current 34-goal season, which is on pace for 54 goals, I have him ranked above. Over an 82-game average, Kreider puts up 28 goals and 24 assists, has 24 goals and 39 points across 80 playoff games, and has been a fixture on the Rangers. Would the Oilers have loved to draft him? Absolutely. Would they have probably traded him away prematurely anyways? Likely enough. Regardless, in this world, I have Kreider going at 10th overall. Now this one hurts in more ways than one. With the 8th overall selection in the draft, the Dallas Stars selected the 6th highest forward in Scott Glennie. Glennie was coming off of a 70-point season in 55 games with the Brandon Wheat Kings of the WHL and finished his 4-year junior career with 308 points in 252 games. All signs were pointing to an NHL career. In 2011-12, Glennie made his NHL debut with the Stars, playing just 13 shifts for 9.5 minutes of ice time, registering a couple of hits and 2 penalty minutes. He ended up playing the rest of the 2011-12 season in the AHL, only putting up 37 points through 70 games, and broke his wrist at the end of the year. He played only 37 games the next season due to some more injury trouble, and when seemingly at his best and ready to make the team at the beginning of 2013, he sprained his MCL in a freak accident during a preseason game with Dallas, which cost him another month. Thankfully, Glennie did get back to play and helped the Texas Stars to a Calder Cup championship later that same year. From 2012 to 2015, Glennie would remain with the Stars' AHL affiliate and put up another 81 points in 156 games for a total of 118 points in 226 AHL games. By the end of his time in Texas, Glennie was playing with a torn labrum and rotator cuff and getting cortisone shots just so he could stay in the lineup. Surgery was eventually required. Glennie was not re-signed after 2015 and sat out for the 2015-16 season as he got shoulder surgery. In 2016-17, he returned to his hometown and signed with the Manitoba Moose, the Winnipeg Jets farm team. He scored 7 goals and 20 points in 45 games, but after a foot injury which left him with permanent nerve damage and the need for 2 more surgeries, Glennie decided to call it a career. In 2019, Glennie joined a hockey agency as a player, agent, and video coach. Needless to say, it was a very difficult journey for Glennie, and while more of an injury issue than a talent issue, Dallas would certainly have liked to draft who I have ranked as number 6 on the forward class. As the 6th highest ranked forward in the 09 draft, I have Brayden Schenn going to the Dallas Stars. I believe that this is a great fit as Dallas would be selecting a similar 6'1" centerman who also played for the Brandon Wheat Kings. Schenn has had a wonderful career so far and has been a part of a couple of blockbusters that saw him go from LA to Philadelphia and later from Philadelphia to St. Louis where he plays now. Over his 749-game career so far, Schenn has an 82-game average of 23 goals and 31 assists with a career high of 70 points in 2017-18. He is currently on pace for a 68-point season in 2021-22 and has had fantastic success with the Blues over the past 5 seasons. Oh, and don't forget his 12 points in 26 games en route to a Stanley Cup championship in 2019. If Dallas would have had the other Wheat King available at number 8, things may have been very different. With the 7th overall selection, the Maple Leafs selected the 5th forward of the draft, Nazem Kadri. This is the first selection that I would not change. Nazem Kadri played parts of 10 seasons with Toronto and in 561 games scored 357 points for an 82-game average of 24 goals and 29 assists. He really showed what he was capable of in 2016-17 when he scored 32 goals and 61 points. But in the 2009 offseason, with 3 years left on his contract, he was traded to the Colorado Avalanche in the package that brought back Tyson Barrie, who had 1 year on his deal and later left for Edmonton, and Alex Kerfoot. On the Avalanche, Kadri has scored 134 points in 157 games, including his current career-high 66 points in 50 games, which puts him on pace for 108 points in the 2021-22 season. At about 0.68 points per game through his career, Kadri has turned out to be quite a talented NHL player, and honestly had to endure a lot of pressure in Toronto. Although Toronto made the right selection, with how well he is doing today alongside Nathan MacKinnon, maybe it would have been a better idea to keep him and his $4.5 million cap hit alongside Austin Matthews and not spend that John Tavares money. Now here's where we're seeing a big readjustment. With the 5th overall pick, the LA Kings selected Brayden Schenn, a player who we've already established as an extremely talented player. However, as the 4th highest ranked forward of this draft class, I have Mike Hoffman, who dropped to 130th overall, going to the LA Kings. Taking into consideration Hoffman's current mediocre numbers on the Montreal Canadiens, I understand why some of you may be shocked by such a high ranking. However, when looking at the numbers, it's hard not to. Mike Hoffman was a bit of a late bloomer and has played less games than most of the big names in the 09 class. His first full season only came in 2014-15, but through 583 games in his career so far, he has 198 goals and 412 points, which gives him almost 0.71 points per game. Over an average 82-game season, that's good enough for an average of 28 goals and 30 assists. Hoffman is a premier sniper and power play specialist, something that the Kings would have loved to have alongside Anze Kopitar during their mini dynasty. Put him on an elite team with elite passing, and he is that much better, as evidenced by his 36-goal, 70-point season with Florida in 2018-19. Not only do I see Hoffman as the 4th-ranked forward in this class when looking exclusively at the numbers, but I am shocked by the fact that he went as late as 130th overall. Yes, there was the issue with his then-girlfriend, now wife, and Erik Karlsson's wife a few years back on Ottawa, but that seems to be settled now. If the league knew what Hoffman would have turned into, I see him getting drafted here. With the 4th overall selection, the Atlanta Thrashers made their second-to-last first-round pick in their organization's history and selected Evander Kane. As previously mentioned, I would have Kane going a little later, and after Matt Duchene drops from number 3, as I will explain, he is exactly the kind of player that the Thrashers needed. Matt Duchene was electric, and coming straight out of the OHL, scored 55 points in his rookie season, which earned him second runner-up in Calder voting. Duchene went on to play almost 9 full seasons with the Avalanche, scoring 428 points in 586 games, before asking for a trade because he wanted to play playoff hockey. Duchene was the main piece in the 3-team deal that saw him move to Ottawa, Kyle Turris move to Nashville, and Colorado received Shane Bowers, Samuel Girard, the pick that became Bowen Byram, and more. A masterclass by Joe Sakic. Note that Duchene has played in 20 playoff games since being traded in 2017, while the Avalanche have played over twice as many. But back to the player. After going about point per game on Ottawa, moving to and having some struggles on Columbus and in his early days with Nashville, Duchene is back on track with a career-high 77-point pace in 2021-22 and has 648 points in 876 games. Across an 82-game average, that's good enough for 26 goals and 35 assists. The Thrashers would have loved to have a playmaker like Duchene to pass to Ilya Kovalchuk, something that may have kept Covey from moving to the Devils around the 2010 deadline, and the team eventually relocating to Winnipeg soon after. With the 3rd overall selection in the draft, the Avalanche took the 2nd forward off the board in Matt Duchene. Now, as I just explained, we all know how good Matt Duchene is. However, I believe that Ryan O'Reilly is actually the second ranked forward in this draft class. Funnily enough, the Avalanche did select Ryan O'Reilly with the 33rd overall selection. Although Duchesne's point per game numbers are slightly higher than O'Reilly's, I would argue that ROR has the edge. With a slow start to his NHL career and not as flashy of a game, I understand why teams like Atlanta passed on him, or in fact didn't even think about him, since he was projected much later. After scoring 66 points in 68 games with the Erie Otters, O'Reilly made the jump to the NHL in 2009 and scored 26 points in his 81-game rookie season with the Avs. By his third season, O'Reilly was starting to put up 50 to 60 plus points per year, including 64 in 2013-14. At the 2015 draft, O'Reilly was traded in a package to the Buffalo Sabres, which brought back a bag of names that included former first-rounder Mikhail Grigorenko, JT Compher, Nikita Zadorov, and a second-round pick. After 3 impressive years with Buffalo, O'Reilly was traded to the St. Louis Blues for a very unimpressive package that included Vladimir Sobotka, Patrick Berglund, a first-round pick that later became Ryan Johnson, a second-round pick, and Tage Thompson, who is pretty much the only silver lining. O'Reilly would score 77 points in his first year with the Blues, adding another 23 on his way to a Stanley Cup ring, the Conn Smythe, the Frank J. Selke, and, oh yeah, is now the captain of the team. Another hard knock for Buffalo. Speaking of hardware, O'Reilly also won the Lady Byng in 2014 and has received votes for the Selke every single year of his career aside from his rookie season. Over an 82-game career average, O'Reilly is good for 21 goals and 38 assists, but if you were to remove his first 2 years, which is not something that I normally do, but I just want to highlight how those two were really outliers, and they have a big impact, his 82-game average would become 23 goals and 42 assists per year. Even though Colorado selected him, I'm sure that both they and Buffalo would have loved to have hung on to him, or at the very least, gotten more back for him. At 33rd overall, this was a steal of a pick, and I rank this elite two-way playmaker as the second best forward of his class. Finishing it off with the first overall selection in the 2009 NHL Entry Draft, there is no need to change the Islanders' selection of Johnny T. John Tavares. Now, what they should have done with him is a different story, but we'll get to that. In the OHL, John Tavares lit up the league and scored 433 points in 247 games, enough to solidify himself as the indisputable top forward to go in the 2009 draft. Tavares made the jump to the NHL right away, scoring 24 goals and 54 points in a full 82-game rookie season with the Isles. Tavares was named captain of the team before the 2013-14 season and went on to play 669 games with the team, scoring 272 goals and 621 points along the way. However, after the 2017-18 season, Tavares' contract was running out and he decided to test free agency. Tavares was thought to be the biggest free agent in the modern NHL era, and after meeting with 6 teams including the Islanders, decided to sign with his boyhood team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs signed him to a 7-year, $77 million deal, significantly less than the 7-year, $91 million deal that the Sharks offered him. Tavares chose the Leafs due to his perception of them as a Stanley Cup contender, and the fact that he was living out a childhood dream. Now getting back to the players, since that Islanders-Leafs situation could be delved into much more deeply. Despite some cold streaks, Tavares has delivered with the Toronto Maple Leafs, scoring 246 points in 252 games at the time of this recording. Over an 82-game average, Tavares is good for 34 goals and 43 assists, and has by far the best point-per-game numbers of his class, currently sitting at .94 points per game. No matter who he's playing with, Johnny T is the real deal. So there you have it, my friends. Thus concludes this redraft of the forward class of the 2009 NHL Entry Draft. I hope that you enjoyed this deep dive, because if you're like me, stats like this never get old. I'd love to do a bunch more of these videos, so please let me know what class you'd like to see next. I'm already working on a few, but I would love to add your suggestions to the queue. This video did take a couple of days to research, another day or two to edit, and over 4,000 words of writing and typing and reading out. So if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and comment your thoughts. Any and all feedback for this new type of video would be very much appreciated moving forward. And if you are new to the channel, we would love to have you join the team. We do NHL 22 franchise mode, FIFA 22 career mode, NHL 07 Dynasty, and more here on the channel, plus more over on Twitch, Formula One, MLB The Show, and more over there. So all the links for those things, including the Discord server where we'd love to talk more as well, talking hockey, franchise mode, and more. All those links are in the description. Be sure to let me know what surprised you about this draft class. Do you agree with my rankings? Disagree with the rankings? How would you redraft the class? Let me know down there in the comments here on YouTube or even on the Discord server. But all that being said, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I hope that you enjoyed this type of video because like I said, if you're like me, then you are eating these stats up for breakfast. Hindsight is always 20/20, but just crazy to think about how some of these teams would be looking and how the league may have changed if teams had known what some of these players would have turned into. So thank you for taking the time to watch. Looking forward to talking to you again soon, and I will see you in the next one.